Welcome to the Men of Iron podcast, equipping men for growth in your faith, family, friends, fitness, and finances. Check out menofiron.org to learn more about how you can get involved in or support the vision of changing a culture one man at a time. Thanks for listening. Here's your host, Chad Zook.
What types of things should a man do to grow as a man? Or how does a boy transfer into manhood? Are there some classic attributes that we as men can follow to help us to understand more what it means to be a man and to be good at being a man? This is episode 80 of the Men of Iron podcast. My name is Chad Zook. I'm the host of the show. In this episode, I talked to Vic Verdier. Vic Verdier was in the French Navy for 10 years. He had the opportunity to train numerous soldiers, including close quarter combat, skydiving, long-range weapon shooting, first aid, and explosives. He is qualified to be a life transformation coach, a fitness instructor, a kettlebell instructor. He himself is a gym owner. He also is a powerlifting and Olympic lifting coach. He is a specialist when it comes to nutrition, and what we're going to talk about in episode 81 is he is also a movement instructor, a MoveNat master instructor, as a matter of fact. We talk about a wide range of things, but specifically what we talk about are some classic attributes of manly men. Enjoy this podcast, gentlemen. It was inspiring to me. I apologize for the audio. We were connecting all the way from France, so a little bit of the audio quality was not quite there on his end, but it is on mine. So enjoy this, gentlemen. I'll see you on the other side. Well, today on the Men of Iron podcast, we have the honor of having Vic Verdier on the show. Welcome, Vic.
Thank you for having me.
Vic is coming to us from France. So this is, you can see, or you can tell rather, that he is a Frenchman. He has a lot of specialties that we're going to drill down into this podcast. But what I thought we would do is just kind of tee it up and let the audience know who you are, Vic.
Oh, thank you. So my name is Vic Verdier. I'm French, but I haven't lived in France for the last 20 years. I've been traveling a lot. I used to travel because I was in the French Navy first for 10 years, and I was doing a lot of training, military training, especially in different countries in Africa. And then I traveled a lot because I was a scuba diving instructor for 20 years. I was teaching cave diving, deep diving, mixed gas, rebreathers, and complex stuff, fun stuff.
Dangerous
and then I
stuff.
travel, maybe a bit. And then I traveled, or I was mostly in Thailand because I was teaching Thai boxing. And then I moved to the US 12 years ago, something like that, mostly because of a company named MoveNat, where we do a lot of natural movement, kind of outdoor fitness, a lot of things like that. I'm sure we'll talk about that more in detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a gym in Seattle, Washington, where we teach kettlebells, barbells, and a lot of movement as well. And I'm doing also a lot of online coaching for men. And I'm very specialized on men over 40s, men who experience some drastic changes or progressive changes in their life as they age. And I help them in a lot of different ways, not only for their fitness, but for their mental health, their drive in general. That's about it.
Yeah, well, that's a lot. That is a lot. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show today is because I think that you're helping men who oftentimes are just kind of like not thought of. You're trying to be specific and help men 40 to 50, 60 in those years, and even men maybe in their 30s who are a little bit lethargic, who are a little bit caught up with, they've had kids and they maybe been married for 10 years and they got busy with work and they just started to neglect themselves. And then you start to see those changes as testosterone drops through the years and decades, that you have less drive, less vitality. And because of that, it's easy to put on the pounds, and it's a lot easier to put on the pounds than it is to actually stay physically fit. So you're advocating for men to kind of step up and say, no, you don't have to lose all that vitality, that you can maintain just a sense of strength and conditioning and be physically fit even as you progress in years. And I think your message is profound, and it's going to be really helpful for everyone who's going to be listening to this podcast. You see, we've already shared some of your qualifications, and you've got a long list of things that you've done, and you just mentioned some of those. I did think it was funny, though, because the French Navy and then all the things you did in the French Navy. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Under Siege with Steven Seagal.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he was a Navy SEAL, but he was also a cook. So anytime somebody asks him what he did, he says, "Oh, well, I'm just a cook." But yet in the background, he's a Navy SEAL. And then when I'm like looking at what you've done, and I myself served in the United States Navy, and I'm like, I did not do any of those things whenever I was in the Navy. So you must have been a cook and doing all those fun things too while you're in the French Navy. But
I actually like cooking. So yeah, I'm French, so I like cooking. That's normal.
Well, you should, being in France and such great cuisine in France. So that only makes sense, right? Well, yeah. One of the mottos that I have in life, and I've had this for a long time. I've been working with men for 20 plus years now, around 20 years. And I know that I just have this motto, and I know it's something that you believe into. And I believe that men must do hard things, and they must be comfortable being uncomfortable. I know that you believe that, but why would you say that that's important for men?
Okay. I think there's different aspects behind this question. So doing hard things is the phrase coined by Theodore Roosevelt. And I think at that time, meaning the beginning of last century, it was easier for men to do hard things. Mm. So I think that if Theodore Roosevelt already saw something happening more than 100 years ago, we should realize that this is even more true nowadays. Mm. It's easy to get complacent. It's easy to get comfortable. It's easy to just to enjoy life and not really fight for anything. Mm. And we can fight for a lot of things. We can fight to stay fit, as you mentioned. A lot of men have a hard time maintaining their level of fitness. Okay, even if it's something you can regain, it's a lot harder to regain it than to keep it in the first place. Mm. Okay, so I would say yes, the level of fitness is something we need to fight for, and it's a daily fight somehow. Okay, but it's also kind of a mental toughness that is, in my opinion, very important. Mm-hmm. Okay. Being able to be resilient, being able to deal with whatever happens in life without freaking out, without. And I don't want you to think that I do it I take in a bad way, but being too emotional somehow is not a service you do to yourself. Okay.
I understand. I understand
being able to suck it up somehow, mm-hmm. And then be emotional afterwards. But when you have to deal with something, you have to deal with something now, not later. And then you can do whatever you want afterwards.
So it's a level of detachment is what you're advocating. It's like if you're in the middle of a struggle and you need to be resilient, there's a time to like think through the emotional ramifications of something, but in that moment you have to detach. Is what I think. This is what you're saying. You have to detach in that moment to get the job done, and then reflect upon it emotionally. I think that this is, of course, we always look for extreme versions of this, but one of the main things that we advocate here at Men of Iron is just the value of family, friendships, faith, fitness, and finances. This is really what we're about. but specifically on the family dynamic, I think that, men doing hard things, and even what you're talking about here, of course, we think of the drastic examples. We're going to war and all this, and let's get the job done, and then let's feel later, but let's just keep, the mission in front of us. But I think that the mission, when we bring an understanding that the mission is at home, I think that we have to understand this too, is we can become so emotional at home that our wife and our kids actually lose the masculine strength that we're supposed to advocate and to bring in leadership that we're supposed to bring in that family dynamic. And if we become too emotional, we become so soaked up in that environment that it may seem like that we're doing the right thing, but what we're doing is we're actually helping other people to lose confidence in that moment. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, that's very true. I can give you a few examples in my life, but I mean, everybody can relate to, I would say, more mundane examples. But as I say, I was in Thailand for a while teaching Thai boxing, but also scuba diving. And you probably remember quite a few years ago, there was a tsunami in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I was on a small island, and the day the tsunami came, so it was Boxing Day, as the Brits call it, meaning the day after Christmas, early morning, and I was diving, so I was offshore, far away, and we didn't have any real impact or anything like that. But when we came back to the island, we could see the damage that the tsunami actually did. Okay, and the damage was really, really not only sad, but I mean critical in every sense of the word, logistics, human, and everything. And you could see the people who decided to take care of business, and the people who were completely drowned, no pun intended, completely drowned in their emotion and the aftermath of this dramatic event.
Sure.
And I think it's, as you say, it's a disservice for your family if you can't react right now and take care of what you have to take care of. And that's why resilience is one of the things I try to work very hard with the people I coach, because it's something that you can train everywhere, anytime, any day, and something that would be useful, maybe not for a tsunami, but for any problem in life. I'm very stoic by nature. I like the Stoic philosophy, and if you study a bit Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, it's all about understanding what you can control and what you cannot control, making the difference between them and reacting to what you can control and do something about, and just letting the things you cannot control follow their course of action.
Well, I think there's an example of this too, and you're not prepped for this question, so I'm just going to spring it on you. That's the kind of stuff that I like to do.
No problem.
But it's something you're well versed in. You talked about diving, and specifically cave diving, and I think that there's probably some lessons there. We may never cave dive. I hope I never cave dive. If so, it's probably by accident, and it's not going to end well. But
it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Oh,
it's
I
wonderful experience.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I'll enjoy your videos if you put some together. But I think that, with cave diving, there's all sorts of kind of takeaways, maybe even from what you're talking about. Because if you're cave diving and you're well underwater, there's all sorts of, the amygdala, the fight, flight, and freeze thing is just going to be just hammering you. And you have to learn how to understand, okay, what's valid and what's not, but to still move forward, even with the amygdala doing what the amygdala is made to do. So how did you help people in those situations, and how did you regulate that fight, flight, and freeze mechanism that's in the brain? How did you help to maintain the ability to function in cave diving?
So cave diving has a very very different aspect than normal scuba diving, because scuba diving, whatever happens underwater, you always have the possibility, the option of going straight to the surface, even if it means potential problems, but you can go straight to the surface.
Right.
In cave diving, you cannot. You're underground, and the entrance / exit might be 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away, an hour away, or whatever. So, in other words, you cannot panic. Panic is never an option. I mean, it's always an option, but it's never a good option. It's never a good option. Okay. So what happens with the students I was training, and what happened with me, is progressive exposure. Meaning you go a bit and a bit and a bit more till you manage to expand your comfort zone. And I think that's a lesson that you can apply in your daily life. Being able to expand your comfort zone to any kind of situation will help you to be more resilient, and it will help you to stay cool under pressure, and therefore not to panic unnecessarily.
Yeah, there's another example of this in a conversation I had with a podcast that I used to host called New Kind of Man. I talked to Errol Dobler, and Errol Dobler was a Navy SEAL, and he was also a FBI agent, but now he's I don't know if he's a master in the Wim Hof cold exposure methodology. I think that you have some familiarity with this too. Yeah. And it's really just a simple way of doing the same thing, of that progressive exposure and understanding, because it's being uncomfortable. It's being comfortable while being uncomfortable, or being comfortable while being uncomfortable. I'll eventually get it right. And so it's the same thing of cold water exposure. It's okay. Your body's naturally telling you, wow, this is cold. Get out, get out, get out. Why are you doing this to me? And yet if we listen to our body, we can also kind of reframe our understanding to say, no, this is actually good for me, because you can recall and start to evaluate really what you're feeling in that moment, so you don't panic. So I think that's maybe even a different example of the same thing that you're talking about. Am I right in that?
That's pretty much the same concept, the same idea. Yes, definitely. And just to piggyback on your example, so I've done some cold water exposure in diving, okay, and then through Wim Hof. And to be honest with you, I hate the cold. I spent my whole life in tropical countries. I'm kind of tropical. I hate the cold, and I did it in diving because I had to do it. That was part of my job, but I never really enjoyed it. And the fact that I managed to work through the Wim Hof method actually helped me through progressive exposure, mental conditioning, breathing, relaxation, and so on. Helped me to, I would not say I enjoy it, but I can deal with it. Okay, so that was out of my comfort zone, definitely, and I'm more comfortable with it now. I will never go just for the fun of it, swim in a frozen lake. Okay, but I know that I can deal with cold water, and it happens to me on a regular basis. Even if sometimes I would say I enjoy. Quote unquote, I enjoy taking a cold shower as well, just because it helped me building this expanded version of my initial comfort zone.
Oh, I totally understand that. I actually went through a season where I just took cold showers trying to do the same thing, not because of Wim Hof. At this point, I haven't really tried any of that direct cold water exposure, getting in, an ice bath or anything like that, but just in a simplistic way through cold showers. And it is refreshing, and it's uncomfortable. And yet it just is. I mean, most people who I've ever talked to about this, they're like, yeah, I don't like it. Even conditioned Navy SEALs who have done this because it's helped them, they're like, I don't like it. People who have done, diving in cold water, they're like, I don't like it. That's the typical thing, but yet they do it anyway. And I think this is just another way of echoing that men do hard things. That it's just this mantra, this truth that I live by, that we're going to have to do the thing that's uncomfortable because it's the best for us and it's the best for others. And one of the things that you talk about, and I found this, I just pulled this right off of your Instagram page. By the way, Vic is a great follow on Instagram. You're going to see that in the show notes. He has so many things that he kind of gives for free that he uses in his coaching practice. So you need to go to Instagram and you need to follow him. But one of the things that you talk about is you say a man always looks for risks, and risks, you love acrostics. That too. You do that all the time. It's good. It's memorable. So you talk about the R represents responsibility. The I is independence. The S is strenuousness. The K is kindness, and S is style. Style is kind of like it's the last thing, and it's the thing that's kind of unexpected. But why do you say that? Because most men, they're like, oh, style, who cares about that? I appreciated that. But so why do you say that a man always looks for risks? Why is this true of men?
Okay, so you mean the risk by itself, the word risk, or the acronym I used?
The acronym you used, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's plenty of things. I think a man needs to be independent. Okay, self-reliant, if you prefer. And if you, in my practice, the people I coach, usually people who are in their 40s, 50s are kind of self-reliant for many reasons. They had responsibility, they reach their goal in their career. Their kids moved out of the house and so on. And they are kind of self-reliant. But younger men, at least the younger men I see in courses or my online coaching, are not always very self-reliant. Mm-hmm. Okay, they are not always independent. They maybe for financial reason, maybe by convenience or by choice, it's easy to rely on someone else to take care of you. It's easy to rely on your parents, maybe. And we see more and more younger men staying longer in their parents' house, in their home. Or they rely on their partner, girlfriend, wife, or anything. And unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, they don't necessarily feel ashamed of that. And I find that a bit sad somehow, that you can just rely on your partner and spend your day playing video games and not being really invested in building yourself, building your family, building your wealth, building your future.
Well, this is where the responsibility,
very nihilistic somehow,
This is where I think the responsibility and independence piece comes in to what you're talking about, being self-reliant and the risk acrostic. It's taking responsibility is, I think, the reason why people are comfortable, men are comfortable and just playing video games and staying with their parents for longer than they ever have. It's because they're pushing back the maturity, because in my opinion, is men haven't carried the weight of responsibility early enough. And the guys that I'm around and the teenagers that I've mentored over the years, I try to get them to understand that they need to take responsibility for their life first and foremost, take responsibility for their fitness, for their well-being, and for their faith. And I think that after learning this valuable piece of taking responsibility for yourself and growing in that leads to this sense of independence. Now, for me, just put my cards on the table. I'm not advocating myself anyway. I'm not advocating an independence from God, because this is a Christian Men's podcast. I'm advocating that God has given every single person a sense of independence with him, but also just autonomy to live the life that he has for them. So this is my core belief. But I think this goes into the self-reliance piece, because men are being held back because what you just said and what I said, and they don't have a sense of independence. Instead, it's dependent on their parents. And then if they get married or they have a girlfriend, then they just transfer that dependence on their spouse or girlfriend. And I think that's one of the things that's keeping men from becoming the best version of themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the difference between boys and men.
That's right.
Boys used to be people with no responsibility, people who live with their parents, people who are relying on someone else for pretty much anything, and who spend their time either studying or having fun. Okay, and unfortunately, I think we see these characteristics being used by boys who should be men by the time they reach their early 20s. Okay, and unfortunately, it's not what I see. Okay, it doesn't mean that all the teenagers and all the young men are completely irresponsible and don't become real men. Okay, but that's what I see more and more often during courses in the US. And in France as well. Don't take it wrong. I see it in other countries as well. It's more of a global problem than just specific to the US.
Yeah, I've actually had conversations with some people in Australia, and they echoed the same thing, that there's just this sense of men, boys not really becoming the men that they're supposed to be. So they just try and maintain that adolescence for a long, long time. Or if they do get married, they still operate as adolescents, and then eventually they actually just separate and then create all sorts of social problems too. So I think that from my experience that I've also seen what you're talking about, and I believe unfortunately that it's true. But I think one of the ways out of that, of course, we talked about responsibility and independence, and that for us to become good men and good at being men, that we have to have those. But also you talk about strenuousness. Why did you add that one?
To come back to doing hard things. Strenuousness will mean at some point being able to be more resilient, being able to be stronger under pressure, being able to fight back. And you can fight for a lot of different reasons. It can be a physical fight, meaning being able to protect your own life, being able to protect someone else's life, people who are dear to your heart, your family, your kids, your friends. But it could be also fighting for other things, fighting for values. There's a lot of discussions nowadays about values or the lack thereof. Being able to stand up and fight for what you believe, in my opinion, is very important. And it could be fighting for your country as well, or fighting for your community. I think all those things are what a man should be dealing with, okay, and not trying to avoid those responsibilities.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think I'm really glad that you said fighting for basically values. And I think that the day and age that we live in, again, this is just my opinion, and we can agree to disagree and still be friends, Vic. But I think that there's so much of a downplaying of values in our day and age, to where men are not speaking what is the truth, and instead they're just become compliant sheep with what's going on in the world. And I firmly believe, and this is the reason why I do the work that I do, if men would step up and actually advocate for their role as men, as protector, provider, and presider over their life, I think that drastic changes would happen culturally. And I think that that's part of that strenuousness. It's getting into that uncomfortable space of saying what is true, even if you're going to meet opposition. And that's that strenuous piece. And of course, this needs to be balanced with kindness. And that's the K in the risk acrostic. It needs to be balanced with kindness. If not, we're not talking about being jerks, right? Like anybody can be a jerk, but men don't need to be jerks. So, so what's your take on that? Actually, that's what I didn't even know that, but that's literally what you said. Being a strong man doesn't mean being a jerk. There you go.
No, No. And you mentioned something, and I like to come back to it if you don't mind.
Sure.
You mentioned that people can be scared, and I think fear is is a very potent motivator in everyone's life. Okay, we are all afraid of something. Okay, the thing is, the more we are afraid of things, the easier or the safer it is to not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of doing hard things, having a more strenuous life, uh, is again going outside your comfort zone, again fighting against nature, against the elements, against
Mm-hmm.
pretty much anything you can fight with. Okay, and pushing your comfort zone and eliminating your fears somehow. I'll just give you a quick example because that's what my father did to me when I was a teenager. I was um, I was afraid of height.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're not afraid of height. You're afraid of falling from height. But okay,
Sure.
so I was
Yeah.
afraid of height, and uh, and at that time I was thinking about going to the navy, the military, and so on. And obviously, it's not very compatible. I became a skydiver, and I did a lot of things after that. So obviously, there was a problem, and my father told me, "Yeah, you have to fight it head on."
Mm.
And he signed me up for a rock climbing course, a week-long rock climbing course in the south of France. A beautiful place where you have cliffs over
Mm-hmm.
the sea. Okay,
Wow.
so even if you fall from the cliff, you fall into the water, and I love the water. Okay, so I was going up afraid and falling a lot because I love jumping in the water. Okay, and progressively it helped me to fight my fear of height, and I can tell you now that I'm completely cured. It's been a long time now. I never had any problem with height. I mean, we all have any problems with height, balancing on a very small surface or climbing on trees and so on. But uh, nothing, nothing can compare with how afraid of, how scared I was just by the idea of climbing on anything when I was a teenager. So. Um, Doing a hard thing is fighting your own fears somehow, and having less fears is also a good way to be more proactive in life or to be more reactive when you need to be reactive. I don't know if it makes sense. Oh,
It does
yeah.
make sense.
Okay,
It makes
good.
perfect
Thank you.
sense, and I love that analogy. Um, and just the rock climbing south of France. I'm there. Like as soon as you said that, and then your cliff on the side of the ocean, like I'm there right now. Mentally, I went there.
And
It
it's
sounds
beautiful.
great.
It's beautiful. It's near Marseille, and it's white cliffs over the very blue, almost turquoise sea. It's paradise.
The Mediterranean Sea is
Yeah.
beautiful. It is beautiful. Gentlemen, that is a wrap on episode 80. If you would like to get better connected with Vic, you can do so at vicverdiercoaching.com, VICVERDIER coaching.com. You can also go to Instagram, and that is Vic Verdier Coaching on Instagram as well. And of course, for all things that have to do with mentoring, with group studies, or with just learning how to be a better man, you can go to menofiron.org for all of your manly needs.
This Men of Iron podcast is brought to you by Men of Iron. If you're interested in getting involved in or supporting the vision of changing a culture one man at a time, or you simply want to know more about our Strong 27 mentorship experience, Equilibrium retreats, Anchored Man video series, or Men of Iron Plus, go to menofiron.org.